Free now. My name's Olga. I'm a longtime Queller Prep tutor, and I'll be hosting our webinar today on the SHSAT. The 2026 season of the SHSAT, there's been some changes to the exam, so I'm going to do my best to kind of incorporate those strategies into today's webinar. Primarily, the test is now done in an online fashion, and it's something called an adaptive exam, where the difficulty of questions changes as the student progresses. So each exam is very personalized. Um, on top of that, they changed some of the mechanisms in terms of how you can go back and forth throughout the exam. So now you can no longer kind of flip back and forth through questions. You have to finish the question that you're working with and then move on, and then you can't go back to it. The only exception to that is that obviously in the reading passages, you can kind of go back and forth into the passage. So those are primarily the differences that we'll be working with. Otherwise, a lot of the content of the exam has stayed the same. The test is moving towards a similar content to the SAT, and the entire sort of Department of Education and exam systems between the SHSAT and SAT are working on standardizing the curriculum more. So those are kind of the changes that we've been seeing over the last few years. So I'm excited to kind of give you guys a taste tonight. We'll be doing about half an hour of ELA and half an hour of math. And then I always leave time at the end for some questions. But this is meant really just supposed to be a taste of what you guys can expect from the Queller Prep courses. And again, Francis linked the discount and the link to sign up for the course. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm working from an old released SHSAT exam, and I'm going to go through the grammar section, and then I'm going to go through one ELA passage and then hopefully a few math questions. That's kind of our agenda for today. And you guys will kind of see how I go along to teach in my classes and kind of like the standard of Queller Prep's tutors. So without further ado, the first section is revising and editing. So let's go ahead and get started and read the first sentence. So it says, the engineers tried some other things in hope of finding a more effective insulation for the compartment. And the test bolds the most important questions, excuse me, most important words in the questions. So we see what is the most precise revision for the words the engineers tried some other things. So for me, whenever you see the word precise on this exam, what this means for you means be specific. So precise means specific. So what that means is we're going to avoid generalizations. So anytime they're asking you for precision, we want to be specific and avoid generalization. So I'm going to put one big red X here, and I'm going to write generalizations. So right away, we can kind of see the problem word, right? Some other things, some things, right? That is not specific. That's the opposite of specific. What did they try? So from this sentence, the way that it's written right now, it is not precise at all. It is very general because it doesn't tell me what they did. So when I'm looking at the options, I'm trying to find the most specific answer choice. So the answer choice that gets rid of the generalizations that we just talked about. So for example, the engineers did experiments with several new materials. Okay, what materials, right? Still not specific enough. If I skip down to C, I see the same thing, two new materials. Again, I don't know what those materials are. So right away, I would get rid of A and C because they both have these general words, new materials. It's a little bit more specific than saying some other things because at least I understand that they're working with materials, but I still don't know which materials. If we compare that to choices B and D, automatically they're a little bit better, right? Because we have foam and fiberglass, foam and fiberglass. So you could see how that's more specific than materials, right? So now the question is, well, how do I pick between B and D? Tested versus worked with. So you have to ask yourself, which one is more specific? Worked with doesn't tell me exactly what they're doing. Tested tells me what they're doing. So the best answer choice here is B because the verb is more specific and we actually list the materials. So whenever you're doing a precision question on the SHSAT, the big takeaway for everybody listening is that you must be specific. And usually that means listing specific things. For example, foam, fiberglass, saying exactly what you're doing. And compared to the other answer choices, you're picking the most specific one, which in this case is choice B. Okay, moving on to the next one. This is a general question that just says which one has an error in its construction. So you get very good at reading these questions and kind of jumping on to the language that gives you a hint at what the test is asking you, right? So it's not just an error, but they're specifically saying that it's an error in its construction. So when you think about construction in a sentence, you think about how a sentence is put together. So automatically, I think about commas and clauses and independent and dependent and the correct ways of combining those things into a complete sentence. So that's what I'm looking for. That's the mistake that my brain is trained for when I see sentence construction and I go ahead and I start reading sentences. Okay, so whenever I start reading, I automatically see in this sentence that I'm starting with a sort of list. So we have walking dogs, cleaning kennels, hand feeding newborn kittens, and supporting the pet adoption process. The animal shelter is looking for volunteers to help with a variety of tasks. Okay, so what do we see right away? We see a list of things, right? Walking, cleaning, hand feeding, supporting. So one thing that runs through my brain right away is parallel construction. So what that means is everything in my list should match. And in this sentence, that actually is happening, right? Walking ends in ing, cleaning ing, hand feeding ing, and supporting ing. So far I have a parallel construction. Now, the second thing that comes into my head is I'm starting with this clause, we'll call it, and my question is, who is doing all these things, right? They're listing a bunch of tasks: walking, cleaning, hand feeding, and supporting. So the question is, who is doing this? Who is walking? Who is cleaning? Who is hand feeding? And who is supporting, right? Who or what, right? Essentially, what we're doing is we're missing our noun or our subject. So I always ask myself, okay, so who or what is doing these things and where is my noun? Now, this is a very common way that they trick people because the beginning right here, this is the noun that all these ing words are modifying. Now, does that make sense? Can the animal shelter itself be walking dogs, cleaning kennels, hand feeding newborn kittens, supporting? No, that's obviously silly, right? The real person that is doing all these things is volunteer, right? They're looking for a volunteer. That's your noun that's being modified by walking dogs, cleaning kettles, hand feeding newborn kittens. But the way that this is written flips that, and that's why automatically, just from reading sentence one, I know that's a mistake. Okay. We are going to keep going. And I'm going to skip to the next type of question that we'll see commonly on the SHSAT. So first it starts with like this set of editing and revising questions that are standalone, like the first two we practiced. And then they give you a revising or editing passage. So this is a little bit different than reading comprehension itself. It's more about like grammatical construction of paragraphs. So what we'll do is we'll skip straight to the questions and I'll show you guys how we go back and forth between the questions and the passage. Okay, so let's start with 6. So it says, read this sentence. Some note that several states have made their community or state colleges low cost or free for students with limited resources. And it says, where should we add this sentence to best support the ideas in the second paragraph? So let's go back and read the second paragraph together. So here's our second paragraph. I'm going to highlight it for us all. So we have many people agree that a college education should be a financially realistic option for those who aspire to obtain a degree. So whenever you guys are reading paragraphs on this exam, in this section, the paragraphs are extremely standardized. So what that means is they follow a particular kind of format. So we usually start with a topic sentence, and then we have examples that support that topic sentence. Right? So when I read this, we have many people agree that a college education should be a financially realistic option, right? So it seems like that's the topic sentence of our paragraph, that college education should be realistic financially. And then, just as we predicted, we have examples to support that. So, for example, is your transition clue word that tells you, okay, they're supporting the topic, right? So now what is the example that they're giving us to support? For example, in 2017, New York State Legislature passed a bill creating a program to cover tuition costs for nearly 1 million students, excuse me. So they're saying college education should be financially realistic. Here's an example. There's a law helping students pay tuition. The state of Tennessee also has a program that offers all students scholarships and mentoring services if they attend one of the state's community colleges. So also is similar to, for example. So one thing that we'll cover briefly here today, but more in depth in lessons, is transition words, right? So when you think about transition words, these are words that signify what the author is, what idea they're trying to come across, right? So when we think about example transition words, we have for example, right? We have for instance. We have also. So far we saw two of these words in this paragraph. We have proponents generally believe that these programs are a step in the right direction for making college affordable for students who have had to take out loans or who would have decided not to pursue education at all. So this ending sentence is kind of similar to our topic sentence, and they sandwich the big ideas, right? That college should be financially possible for all people. And in the middle, we have our supporting details that are signified to us with these transition words, like for example and also. Now, let's go back to our question. Our question says that some note that several states have made community or state colleges low cost or free for students with limited resources. So when I read this sentence, we have several states. And that's an important clue because in this paragraph, we have New York State and then we have Tennessee. So when I think about the way sentences are written and the way that a paragraph works, we want to start with our topic sentence with it, which is general, and then we go specific with our examples, and then we end with general again, right? That's that kind of sandwich method of a paragraph. So when I think about states, right? I would imagine that states are somewhat broad, but then when I think about specific states like New York State and Tennessee, those are more specific, right? So the broader mention of states has to come before the examples of New York and Tennessee. So right away, the only place that that can be is between 4 and 5. And I wouldn't put that before 4 because 4 is my topic sentence that kind of introduces everything. So we have our answer and we know that this should be between 4 and 5, right? Before the part where they start mentioning the specific states of Tennessee and New York. The next one is now asking us about the next paragraph, paragraph 3. And specifically, they're saying which shifts away from the topic. So now the question is trying to find the sentence that does not belong. So again, what's going to help us is transition words and seeing which things flow together and where there is an obstruction, where something does not belong. So I'm going to highlight the third paragraph for us now, and let's read that one together and annotate together. So here's our third paragraph. So now we have on the other hand, so on the topic of transition words, we're opening a paragraph with another transitional phrase. On the other hand, primes you right away that there is contrast, right? So whatever we just read, the author is going to contrast it. They're going to tell us another point of view. So the paragraph prior just told us about how free college, like financially programs that support paying for college education for people that can't afford it is a good thing, right? Should be a financially realistic option. So this one was positive, and now they're going to tell us an opposing view. So I'm going to guess they're going to tell us some of the downsides to the government supplementing these programs, right? And look what we have. Some people oppose bills like the ones in New York and Tennessee because they believe free college programs are unsustainable. So another big thing that I kind of really harp on my lessons, and I think it makes a big difference to your understanding of reading, is the idea of connotation, right? So just by reading a sentence, you can understand positive versus negative, right? So oppose, not sustainable, free college programs, right? All of that is kind of giving me the tone that this paragraph obviously opposes that point of view and is more negative. And now they're going to explain why, right? They gave me their topic, so here's their topic, and now they have to prove it. So now they're going to give me examples that support that. So in order to implement these types of programs, the state pays the college on behalf of the students using funds from the state um, budget, which comes from state taxes. As more students choose to attend college, more funds will be needed to cover the costs. Additionally, many students do not finish within 4 years because they switch majors or because they have to work. Critics believe that these circumstances will inevitably lead to an increase in taxes, a decline in the quality of the education, or both. They think narrower college affordability efforts that target the students who need the most support may be more effective and viable. Okay, so here is kind of our takeaway, right? This is why it's bad because it's going to cause an increase of taxes and it's going to cause a decline in the quality, right? So now we have to figure out, well, which one, which sentence does not belong and why. So, what helps me is thinking about these transitional words. So, the easiest transition word that I see right in the smack middle of this paragraph is additionally. So, additionally, many students do not finish college because they will switch majors or because they have to work. And then the sentence before says, as more students choose to attend college, more funds will be needed to cover the cost. So the question is, does sentence 10 and 11 connect? Because they're using a transition word. So we definitely have, if we're using the word additionally, then we have to be connecting with the sentence beforehand. And the answer here is that they actually do not connect. So the sentence that should be gone is sentence 11. And that's because it shifts away from the topic by focusing on how switching majors or working affects students' ability to finish college rather than on the actual funds that this paragraph is talking about. So everything is about money in this paragraph, but this sentence specifically shifts away from that and just talks about a different issue of students not finishing in time. But it's not directly related to money. It doesn't directly circle back to the topic of the sentence. Okay. So I know that I'm kind of running through this, but I want this to kind of more be like a sampler. And I want to kind of get through all the different components of the test and make sure that we touch on grammar, we touch on ELA, and we touch on math so that you guys can sample the variety of the different questions that the test tests you on and the different strategies and ways that we address those things, which is why I'm kind of running through because the webinar is only until 8 o'clock. But I will do my best to kind of slow down for everybody listening, and also leave time for questions at the end. Okay, so that was kind of our sampler of grammar. So now I'm going to run through a reading comprehension passage. Okay, so this is a standard type of passage. The types of passages that you guys will see on the test vary. They vary from excerpts, from nonfiction texts, which it's kind of like a journal article or an opinion article. Opinion editorial articles are common. Then there are fictional excerpts from stories. There are poems, op-eds I mentioned. So it's kind of a big sampler of a variety of different types of texts that they can throw at you. It's very hard to predict exactly which passage you're going to get. What helps is reading in general, reading kind of things like the New York Times or various kinds of op-ed articles, just to kind of get used to the language. This is an excerpt from a narrative piece called Impressions of an Indian Childhood. My suggestion is always, always, always to read the blurb to kind of provide yourself context of what you're going to be reading about, and always to read the title because that kind of primes your brain of the topic that you're going to be reading about. So I'm going to go through this passage in depth, and we won't go through all the questions associated with it, but I want the big takeaway to be focused on how we go through a passage, how you annotate a passage and understand, how you start learning how different things in the passage connect, and the different things that are important and certain things are less important. And you get good at that by reading a lot of passages and forcing yourself to go through them. Okay, so Zitkala Sa Gertrude Simmons Bonin was a Native American writer, musician, teacher, and political activist who was raised on the Yankton Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. In 1900, she published Impressions of an Indian Childhood. The term Indian was commonly used at the time to refer to Native American people to expose readers to what life is like on a reservation. So here's kind of our priming, right? So she wrote this to show what life is like on a reservation. And we get to know a little bit about our author, which helps our idea of perspective, right? Like who wrote this tells me this is coming from the perspective of this Native American woman who happened to have multiple identities. She was a writer, she was a musician, she was a teacher, she was a political activist. And they share both her Native American name and her American name. And we know that our setting is this reservation. So we got a lot of things from reading this blurb. We understood the perspective, right, of our narrator. We learned about our narrator, and we learned about our setting. And we also know the time, right? Not just setting does not only tell us the place where we learned we're going to be in a reservation, but also the time. So we learned that we're going to be on this reservation in 1900. So all of that information from this big, like tiny little blurb that a lot of people would skip. Okay, so now we're going to start reading. So we have soon after breakfast, Mother sometimes began her beadwork. On a bright, clear day, she pulled out the wooden pegs that pinned the skirt of our wigwam into the ground and rolled the canvas part way up on its frames of slender poles. Then the cool morning breezes swept freely through our dwelling, now and then wafting the perfume of sweet grasses from newly burnt prairie. So, Why did I highlight what I highlight, right? This is a very common question I get when I'm teaching. Like, how do you know to highlight mother or wigwam or perfume of sweet glasses? So let's go through it. So anything that's capitalized that's strange to you should be highlighted because you're always thinking, well, would I capitalize mom if I'm writing a passage? Probably not. But this is very specific, right? Why is mother capitalized? So this is telling me a lot. This is telling me about, we capitalize pronouns that are names or names of cities or states or people. So this capitalization tells me right away it's a form of respect, right? We're capitalizing mother because we respect mother. Now, on a bright, clear day, blah, 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 our wigwam, and we have our little notation. So we know that a wigwam is a hut. So essentially, this is their dwelling, their hut. Next thing that I highlighted was this idea, the perfume of sweet grasses. And the reason I highlighted that is because this is figurative language. So the test very commonly tests you on figurative language. So what you get good at is sifting out that figurative language before you even get to the question. You know that there may be a question on that because the perfume of sweet grasses is a figurative way, right? They're highlighting your senses, right? So this exam tests you on the five senses and on ways of writing to highlight those. So the perfume of sweet grasses is one of those ways that they're highlighting the scent, right? Okay, now we're going to keep going. It says, untying the long tasseled strings that bound a small brown buckskin bag, my mother spread upon a mat beside her bunches of colored beads, just as an artist arranges the paint upon his palette. So we have more figurative language here, right? We have a comparison, comparing mom to an artist. So this is like a simile slash metaphor comparison. Not exactly because they're not using the words like or as, but it's the same idea here. So I would still highlight that. On a lapboard, she smoothed out a double sheet of soft white buckskin and drawing from a beaded case that hung on the left of her wide belt, a long narrow blade, she trimmed the buckskin into shape. Often she worked upon small moccasins for her small daughter. Then I became intensely interested in her designing. With a proud, beaming face, I watched her work. In my imagination, I saw myself walking in a new pair of snugly fitting moccasins. I felt the envious eyes of my playmates upon the pretty red beads decorating my feet. So, what do we notice about this passage? We notice a lot of details, right? It's extremely detailed oriented. So, they're telling us step by step everything that she's doing for these beatings. And we also notice the author's voice and perspective where everything is from first person, right? So we're using personal pronouns like she, I, my. So that tells me that this is the perspective. I'm getting kind of an inside glance. I'm in the brain of this narrator who I learned about, and that's the point of view that I'm reading this passage in. Close beside my mother, I sat on a rug with a scrap of buckskin in one hand and an awl in the other. This was the beginning of my practical observation lessons in the art of beadwork. From a skein, so a coiled length of yarn, or finely twisted threads of silvery sinews, my mother pulled out a single one. With an awl, she pierced the buckskin and skillfully threaded it with the white sinew. Picking up the tiny beads one by one, she strung them with the point of her thread, always twisting it carefully after every stitch. So this continues in that same detail-oriented tone, right? The author is walking us through step by step exactly how her mother was beating. Okay, so let's pause here just for the sake of time and try to address some of the questions that have come out. So the first question is asking us about paragraph one. And one thing that you guys will learn is most of the questions are in chronological order in the passages. So that helps me sometimes a lot when I'm stuck on an answer. And I always teach my students like, okay, if you know the answer to 10, um, and you found it somewhere up here, you know that the next question should be somewhere under that. It's not 100% foolproof, but usually the test is somewhat chronological. And it makes sense because the first question is asking us about paragraph one. And it says in paragraph one, the phrases cool morning breezes swept freely and wafting the perfume of sweet grasses. Okay, what do we have it, right? It's something that we underlined before we even read the questions, right? You start getting good, you start getting a sense of, okay, what does this test care about? And you start like gravitating towards those things, and it's extremely helpful because you already analyze it before you actually get to the questions. Okay, so what kind of tone are these phrases creating? Cool morning breezes swept freely, wafting the perfume of sweet grasses. So thinking back to the lesson, the idea that we introduced earlier of connotation, right? So when I read this, like positive or negative, right? You don't have to be specific, but just in general, when I think about free morning breeze, that sounds nice. It's positive, right? Perfume smells good. That's a very positive word. Sweet grasses, right? All positive. So I'm looking for an answer choice that is positive, right? So when I look at choice E and I see the sadness, right away, I'm not drawn to that choice. That does not make sense with the connotation of the adjectives that the author is choosing. Now, the next one says the enthusiasm, so that's somewhat positive, right? But we have which the author approached her work indoors, which is kind of contradictory because it seems like these phrases specifically that they pulled out are all about the outdoors, right? Morning breezes, the wind outside, the grasses are outside. So this is kind of a contradictory choice. So I'm not drawn to choice F. Then G, the fond feelings. Okay, good, right? Another thing that's positive towards her childhood experiences. So that's nice and broad. And that's totally what she's talking about. And that is kind of suggested to us in the topic as well, because the topic is about an Indian childhood, which is kind of broad and general enough to talk about sort of her childhood experiences. So G is the perfect choice here. If we do one more question, number 11, we have the author's use of sequence in paragraphs 1 and 2 contributes to the development of ideas in the excerpt. So, what do they mean by sequence? By sequence, what they're suggesting is that kind of step-by-step process of beating, right? That's kind of what these paragraphs so far are about. The steps that have to do with beating, right? So first she smooths out the sheet, then she trims the buckskin, then she, picks up the bead in one hand and starts threading. So they're kind of telling us specifically, um, step by step what the mom is doing. And the question is, well, why are they doing that? So in the first paragraph, the author is describing how the morning begins with her mother rolling up the canvas of the wigwam, and then the breeze comes in. And then in paragraph 2, we're using the sensory language that we talked about and this precise order and sequence to describe how her mom prepares the material. So this combination of sequence and sensory is highlighting the sort of enthusiasm for beadwork and emphasizing how the author is paying very close attention to the mom. So what we're doing is we're detailing each step in order to highlight the positivity, right? Again, we're continuing that trend of positivity, enthusiasm. So let's think about why are the other choices not good? So, listing the many steps that are involved in order to explain its difficulty and complexity. So, we are listing them, but her goal isn't to be like, this is so hard and complicated. It's more to be like, this is so amazing and beautiful, and this is my childhood, and this is my experience of watching my mom, and it's positive, right? So, she's difficult and complex are more negative terms, which are not appropriate here. Next, we have conveying the importance of following the steps in a precise order. Again, it's not really about the steps themselves. It's more about the intricacy of those steps and what how fond that is for her. Emphasizing the time required to exercise. Again, it's not about the timing or the actual steps themselves. She's going through that in order to show how intricate and beautiful that detailed process is. Okay, and then the third one, again, just as an artist arranges the paint upon the palette. So if you guys remember, this is another thing that we highlighted before we got to the question. And they're asking us, well, why does the author do that? So what context is this in? This phrase is in the context of comparing the way that her mom arranges the beads to a painter. So we're comparing mom and beads to an artist and the painter. And again, obviously, this is a very positive comparison, right? So she's trying to suggest that her mom is similar or approaches this craft just like a painter does, suggesting that beadwork is a form of art, which is what choice E is saying. So F is specifically too much about color. G, all artistic activities begin with a series of steps. So you're always going to avoid generalizations in the reading section. And we learned in in the grammar section also, they prefer precision. They ask for the most precise choice, but you're never going to choose a choice that says all or never or always. Those are big, obvious no-nos on a reading comprehension section. So G should be really easy for everybody to cross out. And then H, the beadwork tries to imitate art, is somewhat negative, right? We're not trying to imitate art. We're saying beadwork is art. So H is a more negative choice. F falls into the bucket of too specific, right? Where it's focusing just on color. So there are buckets of wrong answer choices that we review in our lessons. And this is actually a really good question to go through them. The too general choice, the too specific choice, and one choice that doesn't match the connotation, whether it's positive or negative, and you're looking for an opposite one. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for the reading comprehension section because we have about 15 minutes left in our webinar and I want to make sure that we touch on math as well. So I'm going to scroll through the rest of this test into the math section so that we can practice that as well. And as I'm scrolling, we can briefly talk about like the different passages. Like I said, very common for there to be at least one poem. So this is an example of a poem that we see on the test. And then we see this is more of a historical kind of article. Instead of a narrative, it's based on kind of like true events. Um, so that's another common type of passage. This is more like an informational one where it's more opinion based and specific. So kind of just to get your sampler. And then this looks like it's an excerpt from a book. And that took us through the English section, and now we're got to the math section. So in the math section, there's a few questions that are like short response where you have to get a numerical answer, and that the majority of the questions are actually multiple choice. So we'll sample a few from each as we sort of finish up our webinar. Okay, so I'm going to start with this very first one, which looks like a very uh, fair question. So we are subtracting a negative number, right? Um, Here, which is the same thing as adding a number. So the first thing that I would do is I would change this to positive. So we have negative 3.8 plus 2.3 plus 1.1. And now we're going to follow order of operations. So in this expression, we have two operations that you guys can see. We have addition and we have subtraction. And order of operation tells us that when you have addition and subtraction, you don't have to do one first and one last. You just go from left to right. So from left to right, I would add negative 3.8 plus 2.3 first. And then I would add that after. So if anybody can do that and put it in the chat at the same time as me, just for some participation here. So we have 3.8 and 2.3. So we end up with negative 1.5 plus 1.1. And then when we add those, we end up with negative 0.4. So, just some estimation tricks as we're doing this together, that should kind of highlight to all of you guys that you're on the right page, like you're doing the math right, right? I always like whenever I'm doing a math problem to be checking my work at each step and making sure that it makes sense and I didn't make a silly mistake, right? So, when we're adding these two together, 3.8 is numerically bigger than 2.3. So I know that in this case, my negative wins. So when I do this math, I better end up with a negative. And I do, right? So that's kind of a hint to my brain, okay, I probably did that right. And then same thing, 1.5 is numerically greater than 1.1. So again, my final answer is negative. So that's positive reinforcement to my brain that I probably did that right. So it's a very easy way to catch yourself making a silly mistake if you forget to carry over that negative sign. You're like, oh, wait, that doesn't make sense, right? The negative number is larger, so my final answer should be negative. Okay, let's sample number 59. So we have angle M and angle R are supplementary. So what does supplementary mean? Supplementary is a vocabulary word that you 100% need to know for this exam, and supplementary should right away stick out in your brain. That means add up to 180 degrees. And while we're reviewing that kind of vocabulary, if they ever say complementary, that should stick out in your brain and you should all be screaming at me. That means adds up to 90 degrees. Okay, but this is supplementary. So I know that angle M plus angle R equals 180 degrees. So that's another big strategy that I try to impart on my students is when you're reading math, words, you translate that into equations, into expressions, because that's how we learn to solve things, right? I can't solve words in math. So right away, I'm transitioning that into an expression that makes sense mathematically, right? Okay, so next it says the measure of angle R is 5 times the measure of angle M. So again, is in math means equal. So I have angle R is means equals 5 times angle M. Okay, so now in my expression, I can't solve something that has two different variables, right? So I have M and then I have R. I can't solve an equation that has two different variables, right? But what I can do is I can express one in terms of the other. So instead of R, I can replace that with 5 times M, right? Because then everything will be in terms of M. And then we can easily solve it. So we can say angle M plus 5 angle M's equals 180. So 6, these are now like terms. 6 angle M is equal to 180. And then I can easily divide by 6 on both sides and solve that angle M equals 30 degrees. And what does that mean? That means angle R has to be 150 degrees. And then we make sure that everything works, right? 330 times 5 gives me 150. And they are supplementary because they add up to 180. So all my conditions are met. And then I always, always, always teach my students before you submit your answer and you move on to the next thing, just reread the question. It takes 10 seconds because you want to make sure you're answering what they're asking you, and they're asking us the measure of angle R. So that's correct. Angle R is 150, right? Because again, you can make a really silly mistake. They can ask you any question. They can ask you angle M. They can ask you what's angle R minus angle M. So there are many different iterations that they can ask you. And even if you did the math right, you could answer the wrong question and lose points for that. So we don't want to do that. So you always finish your math question with rereading the question to make sure that you're answering what they're asking you to answer. Okay, so let's jump to the multiple choice questions to make sure that we sample those as well, as we're kind of more moving towards the end of our webinar. Okay, so let's try this word problem, number 63. So we have Mr. Jones has 550 goats, which is 10% more than Mr. King has. How many more goats does Mr. Jones have than Mr. King? Okay, so what do we know? We know that Jones has 550 goats. And our question is, well, how about Mr. King? We don't know, right? That's my variable, that's my X. Okay, well, what else do we know? We know that um, 550 is 10% more than Mr. King. So 550 is 100% plus 10% more. and x is going to be our 100%. So here's basically how I would set up our proportion. So then after you do this, that's the hardest part, all that's left is solving. So you can cross multiply and solve. So you would have 110x is equal to 100 times 550. Another big thing that I'm very pro is don't do more math than you have to do. So things on this test will cancel out, and that's not by accident. That's on purpose, right? So before you start, multiplying and doing crazy things, just carry things over and see what cancels out. So this 0 obviously cancels out, and then 55 and 11 can cancel out. So we end up with x being 5 times 10, 550 times 10, which is 500. So again, look what they do. They make 500 an answer choice, but that's not correct because they're saying how many more goats does Mr. Jones have than Mr. King? So Mr. Jones has 550 and Mr. King we just solved has 500. So the difference between those is 50. So your correct answer is choice A, but be careful because if you didn't go back and read the question, you could have easily picked choice D, which is how they trick you sometimes. Okay, our next one, we have this expression. So let me rewrite it for us here. We have 2y over x minus y over 2x equals blank over 2x. So what do we see? First problem. Our operation is subtraction, and when you guys are subtracting fractions, you should think common denominator. That's the only way that we can subtract these fractions is if we have a common denominator, right? So what's stopping me from having a common denominator? This is 2x and this is x. So I'm off by a factor of 2. Well, if I want this to be 2x, I can't just change the value of my expression, right? Like that's a big no-no. I can't just add a 2 randomly. That doesn't follow, the basic rules of arithmetic. What I can do is I can multiply by 1. So if I multiply by 2 over 2, it's a sneaky way of multiplying by 1 and not changing the value of my expression, but making my denominator look like the next fraction, which is going to be, beneficial for me because then I can do my subtraction. So, in my numerator, I end up with 4y. In my denominator, I end up with 2x. The second fraction I don't have to touch, right? Because it's the same denominator. And now it's very easy, right? I can just subtract. So this ends up with 4y minus y should give me 3y. And the bottom is common denominator, I don't have to touch. So my little box should be 3y, choice G. Okay, I think we have time for one more, and then I'll sort of pause and take questions. Okay, so this clearly I can see a shape. I know that the topic is geometry, which is commonly tested on this exam. And they tell us a few things. They tell us that PQRS is a square. So automatically in my brain, I'm like, okay, this is a square. That means all my sides are equal, all my angles are 90 degrees, right? I know that right away. They tell me that S is the center of the circle and P and R are points on the circle. And then they tell me that the area of the square is 4 centimeters. So right away, if the area of the square is 4 centimeters, I know that all these sides are 2, right? Because area is side squared. So I know that those sides are 2. And what else do I know? I know that this is a radius, right? So I just figured out the radius of my circle is 2, and they want the area of the shaded quarter. So if I get the area of the full circle, area is pi r squared, and I know that my radius is 2, so pi 2 squared. So the full circle is 4 pi, right? That's the area of the full circle. But I just want a quarter of the circle, so I'm going to divide that by 4, and my answer is pi. So nice and easy. Okay, so I know that I kind of ran through all the different sections, but I wanted today's webinar to kind of be a sampler of things. And we've ran through our hour. So I'm going to pause here and ask you guys which questions you guys have. Any feedback that you guys have for me is always appreciated. Hopefully, this was helpful to you all as you're working towards your journeys for studying and preparing for this very big exam. And if you have any questions about me or my exam journey, I'm happy to answer those as well. And I'll send over the notes from our webinar to Francis um, for you guys to review as well.
And Olga, leave time for Q&A. So maybe by like 8:05, good?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
We'll leave Q&A time.
I can
Oops.
see people are.
Hey, Olga, leave time for Q&A. So we will like 8:05, okay?
Yeah, sure. We're gonna start the Q&A portion now. I can see people are putting in questions into the chat. Um, so you're not allowed to use a calculator on the SHSAT. So all computation will be done by hand. The way that the exam works is there's a new digital platform, so you're able to sort of highlight online and all those kinds of things. Like I said before, there is no full review or backtracking. So once you answer a question in math or the ELA, you can't go back to it. For the passage sets, you can revisit questions within that set until you submit it. But once you submit that passage and the 5 to 6 questions that are associated with it, you can no longer go back to it. Let's see, what is the recommended time to start studying for the SHSAT as somebody in the sixth grade? I would say that it's never wrong to start studying as early as possible and kind of exposing yourself to the different materials. I think the earlier you start, the better. But that doesn't, there's a difference between like starting to study and exposing yourself to the material and then an actual dedicated period of like hardcore studying. I think that should happen in the summer, the year before you take the exam. These are excellent questions, guys. What other questions do you have? Somebody asked if you're allowed to use scratch paper. So you are allowed to use scratch paper on the exam. You just obviously can't bring your own, but they will provide you the exam. Some people are asking about specific scoring. It's kind of hard to answer that question. It depends on your goals of which school you want them to get into, etc. Of course, I can talk about the balance of our classes. So our courses, usually we introduce a practice test at least. We use a and do a practice test at least weekly. Most of our instruction within the lessons are actually reviewing questions together, reviewing tests together, reviewing strategies, doing actual lessons. A lot of the math on the exam are things that, seventh graders haven't covered yet. So a lot of times I'm like doing straight teaching, and same thing for the grammar. We'll teach things like sentence structures and etc. So the lessons themselves are a mix of instruction and reviewing questions and doing strategies. So we try to not spend actual class time of just testing. Those are separate where kids take the test, and then our instruction face to face is more reviewing everything. In terms of whether it's reading first or math first, you can still choose which one. There's no official, they didn't officially state a prescribed order, ELA versus math, but they did say that you can't go back and forth.
And Olga, if you can put up the schedule, just go to the Queller Prep page, the SHSAT January start.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
And everyone, we just want you to know that you will save $100. We're actually going to extend the promotion until 10 o'clock tonight because a couple of parents need more time. So if you sign up with the code QuellerNew100, you can take the course Zoom remote, or you can take the course online, or you can take the course in person. We love having students in person, and we're also very happy to have you via Zoom. But it's the Queller Prep January starts. And Olga, who knows, who's a longtime teacher at Queller Prep, January is the best time to get started for SHSAT prep. It's Saturday or Sunday morning, so you can choose when you want to start for the test prep, Saturday or Sunday. So if you just click on January, and it'll make it larger so that you can see the schedule. Everyone, here's the schedule. It's 14 sessions, and the tuition you will save $100 if you sign up tonight. The code is QuellerNew100, QuellerNew100. And you get the discount code. We hope that you decide to sign up for January. We also offer classes for March, we offer summer, but again, January is a very special time because it really gives you that early start, which you want to get yourself into and you want to get ready for. So please remember, January is a really good time to start. It's also better in many ways than the March start because it overlaps. You get to practice and prep for the ELA Math State exams while you're in the course. So it's very good. In terms of context, the January and the March sessions have the same material, but January is a really special time to get started. In terms of class sizes, we very intentionally keep our classes small. So it's very common that you'll see a class, it's only 10 students at Queller. And we really want to give everyone time to feel special in our class and our program. We want to make sure that you feel that you're getting the attention you need. So it's like 10 to 15, but it's really more like 10 per class. So that's very common at Queller that we keep our groups small so that you get plenty of attention. Olga, if you could speak to it a little bit more as well, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, of course. As a tutor, we do our best to kind of personalize, even though you are in a group with different students, I get to know the students kind of specifically one-on-one. I always take a survey of like which topics people are lacking in, and I review all the practice tests that my students take and go through the questions to kind of understand thematically, like in the class, okay, what are the weak points? Is it geometry and math? Is it more algebra? Is it specific to reading comprehension and connotation-based questions, detail-oriented questions to kind of give myself an understanding of where my class is as a group? And it's very different in each class. And then I do my best to open each session with a lesson that's prepped on the weaknesses of that class. And then, we resurvey the following week when they take a new test. And that's kind of my strategy. And I found that it's very helpful to, still control the class and have it be beneficial for everybody, but give everybody a piece of tailored knowledge. I think that's extremely important and something that we strive to do in all the Queller prep courses. Um,
If you have to switch the class or switch the day, like we'll work with you, but usually you keep the day, you keep the time with the instructors. So that's important. But yeah, I mean, if you're able to keep your time, keep your schedule with your teacher. If you don't like the instructor, you can switch instructors. That's fine. I mean, hopefully you love your instructor. Olga, have you ever had students switch out of your class? No, right? All of these years? No.
not switch out. I've been lucky. But the students are also great. It's a good family. Like
We are a family, we're a community. We also run high school trips, we run high school tours. I mean, you're in a community, so that's what you're getting when you sign up for Queller Prep. If you sign up tonight, and again around 10 o'clock is when we'll close, you get the discount. The discount will be $100 off. And this tuition includes everything, taxes, books, materials, supplies. We deliver material door to door. We have a driver. We deliver material straight to you. So you get that. and we are sending you the sign up link. We hope that you had a wonderful webinar, that you got a lot out of it, and that you take advantage of this opportunity where you can sign up for the classes at Queller tonight. And you take advantage of the discount code that we're offering. I'm going to put it in the chat again so that you have it. That's it. I feel like we covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much. Okay. Olga, thank you so much. I think we're all set from here. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you,
night.
everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.